I'd like to on the panel because we must finish on time. The theme is social reinsertion, and it requires much more than abstinence. It requires opportunities. And here we're going to discuss stigma, the need for employability and rights of the person in recovery, private-public partnerships, and inclusion policies that work in entire Brazil and in other countries. The topic is extremely relevant, and Freemind looks at that with a careful gaze and asks Eliana Borges as moderator. My dearest, so well respected. She is State Director of Policies on Drugs of the State of São Paulo. She's graduated in psychology, specialist in public management, and has an MA in social psychology. She is doing specialization in political psychology. She's worked as counselor, child's counselor, and in SUS and CAP. She is a public servant of the state of the Secretariat of Social Development. She has expertise in territorial diagnosis, support to municipalities to implement of equipment, programs, and services of the system of social care. She's currently the State Director of Policies on Drugs of the State of São Paulo. A round of applause, please. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a huge pleasure to be here. First of all, I'm going to invite our panelists. Please, Dr. Clarice Madruga. Dr. Clarice, she's a professor of psychiatry of UNESP. She's works with epidemiology, substance misuse. She's psychologist from PUC Rio Grande do Sul. She has 2 masters and PhDs. And she is a great researcher involving epidemiological data. Congratulations. Come, Dr. Clarice, welcome. Now I will invite representing our vice governor who had to take an emergency trip, Cleuda Apolinário. She is, in addition to advisor to the vice governor, she's a sociologist from USP. She has experience in execution, management, and monitoring of public policies in the social field, and she's a great expert in developing and conducting anti-drug policies in Brazil. Welcome. Now I will invite Alessandra Siqueira Santos, bringing practical experience. She's technical advisor of policies and actions of SEAD Mato Grosso do Sul State. She has a BA in social services from the Catholic University Dom Bosco, expert in management and of prison system and management of crisis from the Silveira University, and in health management in the prisonal system from the Federal University of Mato Grosso do Sul. She's working in the Central West region. She's a professor and a speaker. She currently works in different state, Mato Grosso do Sul state equipment. It's a pleasure to have you here today. Now presenting the practical experience, we have here Alisson Souza. He's a missionary of the community, Aliança de Misericórdia. He dedicates his lives of spreading the word of the Bible. He's formed in physical education, and he's a postgraduate in logotherapy. He brings together faith and science to promote dignity, inner cure, and spiritual growth. Welcome, Alisson. Now to introduce the theme, I will make a provocation. Yes. I really like this painting. In this, we have two paintings here representing the same scene. I don't know if you know, but we are talking about a philosopher who's there in a scene and he's homeless, right? It's Theogenes, and he's together with Alexander the Great. For you to have an idea, this scene has been portrayed in over 10 different paintings, big experts, and etc. We have here one by Nicolas Andres Elucio, 818, and Tiziani, 1740. Why do I like this scene? Because it's very provocative. In both scenes, you will see Theogenes, it's in a homelessness situation. Alexander the Great, take a look at his clothes even, and he's always has his hand like this or like that. Why? And why does he do that? Diogenes, he was known by his wisdom, and he was called a philosopher. And there is a sentence that's very interesting because he used to be philosopher of cynicism. And he walked during the day. Something called him said he was crazy, and he walked through the and during the day, where with a lamp, holding a lamp, an oil lamp. Why? Because he said he was looking for an honest man, and people used to say that he was crazy. Today, people say he was a philosopher. But this theme, which is our point of departure for our discussions, I will later give the floor to Dr. Clarice. Alexander, he comes up to Diogenes and he wants to take him out from the streets. And Alexander asks him, I'll give you everything. You only have to tell me. What is it necessary for you to no longer be homeless? And of course, he used to live in a barrel on the street. And then he places his hand in front of Alexander and says, do not promise what you can do. Get out of my face, you are on the way of my sunlight. Why this provocation? Because our question is, when we make an intervention with a person, we are promising, what are we promising them? Are you going to be able to do what we promised? That's the question Diogenes asked Alexander. Alexander, as according to the story, he turned his back on him and left. So don't promise what you can do. And with this provocation, I'll give the floor to Dr. Clarice. Amazing. I'm sorry. Amazing. I won't be as scholarly. I will be a little bit like Homer, but I will try to answer your question. Well, the question here was to talk about social reinsertion. So what I thought, before getting to the data, I'd like to make a disclaimer, and I think that's increasingly important in our context. We have a scenario of many interests and conflicts, and I will bring data from different studies, and I want to make sure that that information is shared with all of you. My idea to promote this discussion and to answer the very well put question made by Eliana is to talk a little bit about what each of these studies with which you work answer and bring as a contribution to social reinsertion. So of course I'm going to talk about LENAD. We have just finished the survey on alcohol and drugs. It's the biggest national survey on the topic, and I'm going to talk about the results from LENAD. about reinsertion. So I'm going to talk about the survey it's not a survey actually, the data from the monitoring system of therapeutic communities made when Gleuda was in Coed in the beginning of the Recomeço program, which was held throughout 2014 up to 2016 and it continues to happen, but I will talk about data until 2016. I will talk about the survey and use scenes of that population and see what can inspire us from that, because the idea is to talk about numbers, how data contribute to this discussion. For those who don't know, LENAGE is a probability survey, a family investigation that bring information about drugs. Its first edition was in 2006, repeated in 2012, and now in 2023, for the first time, we have data that represent the entire country in a comparatively with the 2012 edition. So the first information that we had, and it's important to mention how much we were blind in terms of data, national data about drugs, not due to the lack of surveys, but the lack of indicators that were compared that could bring that idea of how the situation is in the country comparing with other edition. And now I'll give my provocation, which is how is difficulty to in such a big quantity to have consistent investment, to have systematic surveys, to have that data. So these data I will bring to you, they are comparative, but they do not make it's not feasible to analyze a trend. If I'd like to talk about the epidemiology of crack and cocaine use, I cannot talk about trends because we don't have such data, because there were no sufficient serial and comparative surveys to talk about trends. So here's a protest as well. The second information from Lenage on our theme. Okay, we have to look at crack and cocaine to social reinsertion of this vulnerable population, but our problem regarding public health and epidemiology is alcohol. So let's agree with that on that. So when I put the Lenage data side by side, thinking about proportion on the population that has issue, nothing is compared to alcohol. Maybe bets. Maybe bets might be competitive, let's say. So we already have betting over there, and the issue of gaming disorder occupying the place of tobacco, and cocaine and crack right behind alcohol. So we are going to talk about a population that is vulnerable, that needs social insertion after treatment, but they are not, in terms of epidemiology, total numbers, they're not our biggest health issue. Our main problem is alcohol. What Lenage says about cocaine and crack. So you have to be fast with the QR code. I will put a lot of QR code and I will speak fast. And everything I say, it's available in the material through the QR code. So although the NAGI does not offer comparison opportunities to show trends to see if it's increasing or decreasing, we continue without answering the question, is there a crack epidemic? Is it a trend to increase? We do not have data to have a precise answer because there were 10 years went by between editions. But within Lenage, we have a question about how was the person's consumption before the pandemic, because this survey happened right after the COVID pandemic. And if we are going to talk about a trend, the trend is to decrease. Statistically, we have a stabilization of consumption of crack and cocaine in Brazil. And it's interesting to see that we have data showing that the consumption throughout life has increased significantly. So sometime in those 10 years, there was an increase. So a history of having already used, but not of recent use. So it's an important information to have. Another data. When we do a home survey, we have a representativeness representativeness of an entire country. However, there's a selection for among those who are understanding the interview, because in Lenage we have a confidential system of response. So you go to the house of the person and you ask them if they have used crack. So it's a confidential methodology, which generates a bias because the most vulnerable people cannot read and cannot answer. So once Lenage uses audio as methodology, in which is no longer necessary to read and write, what do we discover? A very much higher prevalence of crack. This is crack, okay? This table refers to crack. So illiterate, did not go to school, it reaches 12% the consumption in life, crack consumption. So we start having a better dimensioning of consumption in the country when we start to not limit what these studies can generate.
Now we're talking substance with greater power of addiction, cocaine or crack. 74% of users have this diagnosis for dependency. That's very atypical for other substances. We do not see this proportion. I will show it to you later in a comparative way. The proportion of dependents in each group of users. So I think this information that only a national survey can provide, because it's not biased, and we can see the proportion of people that have a problem within the ones that already have the type of behavior, whether bets, whether alcohol, marijuana, crack, or alcohol. So in cocaine, the greatest proportion of dependent people among the users. So it's nearly 72% of the users manifest symptoms of addiction. So maybe in terms of proportion, it's not the largest problem of public health, but I have a very high proportion that people that use it will develop a problem very fast. And I have another information here from Lenage to contribute to this debate. Among the ones that do have problems with disorders, addiction disorders, whether cocaine or crack, only 1/10 search any type of treatment. So this is very insightful. When you look at the population that you serve within a clinical context, you will always be looking and within a biased way, because that is the tip of the iceberg. And it's already a case that worked, because it already in the network of services, because most of them will not reach any type of door of treatment. Even crack and cocaine, which are the substances that provide that cause the worst disorders, they will not reach for help. You have to have that in mind. You're already talking to the person that asks for help, that very small part that asks for help. So here is our website. You can take a look at it. We have data on alcohol consumption, cocaine consumption, and the meds, as I mentioned. To contribute to our debate, I brought another study, which is the study of the monitoring of the therapeutic communities. It was the master of Kachazekawa, who's a doctorate student at Unifab today. It was done with Febrac Coed to map the study of closures of people that did go through social reinsertion services in the Recomeço network of São Paulo State. So what does the study show us? Well, a very small proportion of therapeutic communities are in fact apply or offer at least one activities of the domains that are assumed at PNAD. So we have a law, PNAD says there are 4 domains of offers of activities that these facilities should offer within, which are spirituality, leisure, training, capacitation, and self-care. Only 47%, less than half of these therapeutic communities of the sample, that does not represent the country, but São Paulo state it represents within a network that is monitored very closely. Less than half of it was offering these intake, these people that were intook. They have usually just one of each. They don't have all four of them. So this is very important information that I'm showing, that the study showed us. Other information that this study shows, when leaving the facility, so after the period of being treated, only 21% actually fulfilled what we defined as indicators of social reinsertion, which is making their own living and having a place to live. So what is social reinsertion, right, Aliana? Answering your question, but when we consider in a more quantitative way, two indicators that are basic and very simple. Not that reinsertion is only that, but it's the minimum. We only have 21% of them actually fulfilling what is expected from that period of being treated and taken care of. The information that the study provided to us, and that is very relevant. Time is essential. The longer they are in these facilities, the greater the chance of being reinserted when they go out. That's nothing new to us. We already knew that. It surprised us 0%. So the greater they are, the longer they are in a protected environment, the greater the chance of reinserting in society. How does this study help? Is how much? So it showed us that as of 15 days in the facility, they will start having greater opportunity of being reinserted. So less than 15 days, doesn't matter what he or she is doing. Know it in practice. We're talking about a period of desintoxication, reorganization, to then start thinking of what's being offered in this place. So after 15 days, the chance of being reinserted begins. After that 30 days, this chance threefolds. And this is what the study brings as something new. It's not just enough time. Time is not enough. What is offered in this period where they are have been intaken is essential. The broader the offer of activities, I'm not saying the more activities. No, the greater the menu of activities. And I talked about Penado, 4 domains. When I look at this data here and I see the chance ratio, only at least one activity of one domain, at least one activity of the other domain. That is diversity of activities, not quantity. And what we see is that the chances of this person reinserting is like a response. Like it's like when you're studying a medication, the greater you reach the therapeutical doses, the greater the chance of it working. So if I offer a diverse menu, at least one of each domain, one activity of each domain, then I'm able to reach uh, nearly 8 times more chances of this person being reinserted at the end of their time there. So this data is very important to provide insights and collaborations to our discussion, and offering a very diverse menu, at least one activity of which one of the 4 domains is fundamental to increase their chance of social reinsertion. So this was very important data. And here are the links where we publish about these findings of the monitoring survey. And to conclude, I'm going to talk about Lekuka, which is my favorite. Lekuka, if you do know it, is a survey that is being carried out in São Paulo since 2016, where we monitor the scenes. We have gone through some government scenarios, dissipations, agglomerations, and we had an edition that made Lekuka survey in another capitals. So Fortaleza and Brasilia also are creating these surveys in a scene that exists here, which is in the commercial sector called Buraco do Rato, the rat hole. In Brasilia, And in Fortaleza, what are the Lukuka data that it brings to us regarding reinsertion? First of all, it's essential to understand who is this population we want to help. What do we mean by that? In Fortaleza's Lecuca, in this edition, we ask this question, São Paulo, Fortaleza, and Brasilia. We would ask, put in the questionnaire a very specific question to inspire social reinsertion, which is, if you had a chance of doing any type of professional training, what would you do? And we had very interesting answers from doctors to surgeons, psychologists, loads of psychologists. So, of course, there is a factor, subjective factor of this person that is in a situation of use and bringing you real answers. But we also had answers like in Fortaleza, large populations, a large proportion saying that they would like to train as a waiter or as a cook. So in Fortaleza, in its use scene, called Hotel Preto, Black Hotel, a great institution that was offering cooking courses. Of course, they were thinking about that institution that was being built with a great wall dividing them from the users. And with the data we have from Lecuca is that this promotion it will then be offered to this population of Fortaleza. Many of them have joined this training, so we were able to lead to public policy based on data of Lecuca. So this population will not only train in something that they said that would be attractive to them, so it's within their profile, but also information that would allow for creating a treatment and care unit that we could also, but that was a support for us to provide more effective actions within this context. So this is information on Le Cuca, which contributes first, knowing the profile of the person. Second, what is the relationship between vulnerability and drug addiction? Le Cuca brings data that I always repeat in all presentations, which is an assumption that is made by scene of use, that scene of use is the consequence of social vulnerability, that the situation of dependency of crack comes from and it's more associated to people that were already in a situation of vulnerability. What Lecuca shows in São Paulo and other capitals we investigated is that it's not true. Although it's a two-way thing, we have from one side so a very large association of factors related to being prompt for treatment, which depends or not if this person was living in the streets before crack. So with Lecuca, we saw that the readiness of being treated, that is the willingness of this person for seeking for help, has to do with the history, their background before they being in that situation. If it was a person that was already living in the streets before using crack, so we should not generalize. Most people in the scene of use had never been living on the streets before. What makes this person wanting to seek for help is one thing, and the person that always lived in the streets will have another motivation. What Lecuca shows is that depending on the prior experience of the person, this person will have the motivators that will be the triggers for asking for help, among which is the largest number of users in Brasilia and Fortaleza in scenes of use. Most of them were not living in the streets before crack. So first they started using, they isolated themselves, they excluded themselves from others, then they went to live in the streets in the scene of use. For these individuals, the story of the treatment, every time they enter a treatment, we are talking about a revolving door. Each time they enter a treatment, they will increase their chance of actually being treated. So it's a recurring disease, as a disease that is always coming back. But when they enter a new treatment, their chances of being recovered decrease. So those that were already in a situation of vulnerability before CRIC, talking about treatment, seeking for help, reduces their chances of seeking for help. Did you get that? So for those that never had a house, never within a social network, our web, already in our web, or those that we never, then we don't talk about reinsertion. We talk about insertion in this case because they weren't there before. The only motivation for them is emergency, physical issues. The only associated thing for them to want to be in treatment is needing emergency, is being able to connect to a health system in general. So this has to do with a type of approach. How are you going to approach these individuals?
Here's the links for our publications using Lekuka, and thank you very much for Lekukers. Without them, we would not have data on use scene, even CAPS here in Brasilia, and contact for further information. Who we are basically the same for all the studies I showed here. Professor Ronaldo Laranjeira, Unifesp team, Unifesp, the team that's part of the government, SPDN, which works in partnership with the state government, and Lenage. Here's the web link for you to get more information. That's it. Thank you. Thank you. Professor Dr. Clarice, your data were extremely important for us and and insightful. Now I give the floor to Alessandra Siqueira Santos. She will talk about her experiences. Good afternoon. While the presentation doesn't come in, I'd like to make a correction here. When I was introduced, it was said that I am advisor of the Council of Policy on Drugs. Just to say that currently I do not have any type of attachment with that because I'm back to working with the prison system where I intend to continue my research. Well, to dialogue with you, I brought the issue of drug addiction and imprisonment and social reinsertion. Here, doctor, I put under parentheses, necessary dialogues. Well, when we talk about all of this about this complex theme, what do usually see as something that becomes central in the dialogues? Is it the substance? Is it the subject, the individual, or the disease? This, in spite of that, what I have seen in imprisonment context, focus was always placed on substance. We didn't talk. No one talked about the person that was ill due to drug addiction or the illness itself and means to overcome it. In view of that, I decided to work with that population to develop my research, which resulted in a master thesis and later in my PhD. In my MA, which was defended in 2020, I studied the relationship between drug addiction and imprisonment reincidence. This context in Mato Grosso do Sul. Just going back a little bit. Within your knowledge, within you do see, you work, you watch, where you work, do you believe that there's a relationship with drug addiction and repeated imprisonment? The person is arrested again and again and again. Who do you think there's a relationship between that, imprisonment and drug addiction? Please raise your hands. Is there a relationship? Thank you. Another question. Have you read or did you know about any study, research that talked objectively about the issue of drug addiction in imprisoned people regarding prison recidivism? Two people raised their hands, and that was one of the things that motivated me to research that. Many research on drug addiction in different scenes or territories, but when I took the issue of drug addiction to the prison environment, trying to understand if there was a relationship with drug addiction and prison recidivism, I I wasn't able to find that type of study talking about these people and their relationship. So that's how my research began. So it's important to highlight that in my MA, my participants were people who were imprisoned. So since it was a qualitative study, I focused exactly on the perspective of those individuals. I removed the clothes of knowledge because sometimes we think that we know things, but it's important to know that we become increasingly aware that we know nothing or very little. We become thirstier for knowledge. So at the time when I started my MA, I was working in the prison system for 14 years. I worked in different prisons, male and female prisons. So I had already had many dialogues about that. And data collection was from 2019 and 2020. In my PhD regarding the application of anti-drug policies in the prison system, I conducted a study from the perspective of the person that works there, the the one who's on the field, on the ground, those that open and close the locks, prison directors, prison wards, prison agents. At that time, they were called agente penitenciário. Now it's a different name. And technicians, social workers, psychologists, those who work in administration as well. And in my MA, I addressed four issues. One, the beginning of the experience with drug use, family environment, and crime, committing crime, and then the situation of imprisonment. So I'm talking about imprisonment, not reinsertion in the system. I wanted to know back then in your history, when you were in prison for the first time, was there a relationship with drugs? Then circumstances under which the crime that took the person again back to the prison system. So I didn't ask if it was due to drug use. I left the question open for the person to feel at ease and not obliged to reply if it was due to drug addiction or not. And then the fourth aspect, modalities and treatment. So which types of treatment do you know? And out of them, which one do you think works for you? This one was the cherry on the top of my MA. Well, since it's a MA thesis conducted in 2 years and PhD in 4 years, to bring you the results, I brought only some excerpts of what these participants said. So regarding when they began to use family and crimes. My brother used to use marijuana. I was 10. I was curious. I tried once. I didn't like. I think I didn't know how to do it right. But at 12, I entered the drugs truly. I was in a, we did, I was poor. I didn't have food, but drugs were always there. There was a drug dealer near my house, and there we drank and used marijuana. This specific participant, he was from a family that had many children, and their parents, they worked in the farm. His parents worked in the farm, and they opened a bar for their eldest son to manage. At the time, he was 14, the oldest son, and he took care of the younger children, his younger siblings. Participant 5. My father was very violent. He drank a lot. He always arrived drunk at home, and he hit me, my siblings. I have always been the rebel one, the stubborn one. My mother, he only cursed. She was in the middle of the war trying to defend us. And that's when we start to notice the lack of factors of protection in the family environment. And then it overlaps the risk factors with the risk factors here, parental absence. So it's not an issue of judgment, it was the way how that family sought to organize itself. But we cannot deny that there was this lack of a person who monitored them, who controlled children. You can go, you can't go, you can't do, I can't do. This is right, this is wrong. And here another risk factor, the issue of violence. It was a very abusive environment, drinking environment, so contact with alcohol. So this acted as a risk factor. I never actually coexisted with my father, so the lack of the father figure. I only met him when I was an adult, and since I was young, I saw everybody drinking, and they fought among themselves. They fought at bars and not with knives and bottles, everything. And then we started to notice that throughout the reports, there was the understanding that their insertion in the prison system occurred due to abusive use of drugs. Because then, when I was 17, I met a guy and he told me to sell drugs for him because I knew many people. But I started to have problems because then I used too much and no drug dealer wanted to sell anymore. I was arrested for the first time when I was 23. I was under the effect of drug and alcohol and I tried to rob a market. I turned 18 in July. So I saved money, left home, and bought drugs to sell. I went to where I started to sell drugs. The first day, I earned money. The second day, I earned even more money. And on the third day, I was arrested. So all of them stated during the criminal practice, they were under the effect of drugs. So or craving, which according to their report is also a moment of very intense agitation than when they are actually under the effect of the drug. And participant 8 told me, I tried to rob again. So now the relationship between the disorder due to substance abuse with the recidivism in prison. So he tried to rob again. He was crazy to smoke, but it was not a true weapon. He tried to rob an old man and he was arrested. And he went back to the prison system each and every time because of the drugs. And no longer he went there because he committed crime. Very often he was in the semi-open regime. He can leave for work on weekends he can spend with his family. But then he started to use drugs again. He was not able to go back at the correct time to prison, and he ended up not going back. And when he was arrested again, he didn't commit any crime, but he was in debt with the justice system. So I used to drink a lot and snort and use drugs a lot. I only robbed once a cell phone and I was caught. But then I was arrested again because of that. And no report. Here, when finally I asked them about the treatment approaches, do you know any treatment? And what do you think it works for you? And here, it was one of the most interesting aspects of the research because although we do not interfere, we cannot do that as researcher, we we do have that expectation. Oh, I think most of them will say this or that, but none of them mentioned only one treatment strategy. None. There was no mentioning of only one single strategy. First of all, I think it's to be God, but I think I need to be committed somewhere and use medicine. So I decided to put the entire quote here, but it's important to highlight that when they talk about when being committed, what do they mean? Become an inpatient. Therapeutic communities. Therapeutic communities, they're inner, no, they do humanized intake. So it's different to it's important to insist on that. Therapeutic communities, they do humanized intake. They do not commit people into them, but it's something that's very rooted in the minds of people. Another one, oh, I trust Anonymous, Narcotic Anonymous. I believe in the higher power. They help me a lot because we need spiritual faith, power, and believe in God. In Mato Grosso do Sul, Narcotic Anonymous started to provide that service for the prison system in 2014. 11 years later, they continue even more present. 11 years of service, non-stop services in the prison system of Mato Grosso do Sul, where they cannot go in person. They do online groups. So female and male imprisonments, semi-open regime, closed regime. And when I have the opportunity, whenever I go, I want to talk about Narcotic Anonymous because they will even have a presentation here.
Congratulations, NA. So you can see here that although I didn't bring all the excerpts, all of them mention spiritual or religious practice as a strategy for treatment in several ways. Oh, when I became distant from God, uh, the devil caught me. When I left the church, I started using drugs. I relapsed. So the superior power is the greatest power. So they had several different wordings, but all wordings made it very clear that it was through spiritual or religious practice of how much that is important to them. So one of the strategies that was not so many cited were the services of public services, CAPS, but we have to remind ourselves that we're talking a population that extremely vulnerable, even before joining the prison system, that have little or no access to public services, public policies. So when I mentioned in a specific situation, have you ever heard of CAPS? Or when I'm in a social office, which is a service for those that have left the system, say, oh, I think I've heard of it, but I don't know how it works. Many of them said that. So it's not that they do not have access because the service does not serve them. It's because they don't have the information of how to access such services. And protagonism for the drug user, the drug addict, for the person that has a drug disorder is essential. It's a criteria that we cannot think of recovery without thinking of protagonism. But we also have to remember that to be a protagonist, I need to have knowledge. And to have knowledge, it's important to provide information to these people. Without information, information leads to knowledge. And without knowledge, hardly this person will actually be a protagonist in their lives in essence. So considerations of masters was that accounts show that we have to consider a model of treatment that covers the individual in all their psychosocial, biopsychosocial approaches. So it's not only about policies against drugs. So there's no use to focus on several actions just about spiritual practice or several actions just about training. No, it needs to be diverse and recognize the individualities of the person. For that, we need to create and strengthen public policies that cover these specificities of drug addiction in a prison environment. For these people that are in prison, and most of whom, and I'd say this as a public servant, as a social worker of the prison system, most of those there that are in prison has to do with their vulnerabilities with drugs. And why is that so hard? Because not even them notice that. It's a very complex and hard effort to make them realize that. So it is essential to overcome addiction is and to prevent and so that they won't go back to prison. So thinking of public policies based on listening to these people, what are their needs, what are the main vulnerabilities that need to be worked on, because they enter the prison system with several vulnerabilities, lack of schooling, no technical professional qualification, becoming distant from their family. Then they get into prison, and there are more vulnerabilities that start overlapping there. And now I go into my doctorate research, where I question the application of the politics against drugs in the prison system. What are the limitations that make it not work so well in the prison system? What is the structure? How could this policy could be applied in a more effective way in the prison system? So it was said that the regarding drug addiction, that's not a priority for the prison system. The priorities of what it has been written down or standardized, and interventions are very specific, depends on how the public servant understands it. If the public servant identifies with it, he will make it happen, but it's because it identified, but it's not something that institution demands because it has not been written as a rule. So having a rule, having a law makes all the difference. If it's not a law, it's not a rule, it will not be in the plan of action, and then it won't happen. We need to treat the issue of drugs. You need a set of actions. It's not just a treatment, a specific treatment. You need to provide opportunity for health, religion practice, and having a job. That's the professional that works in the prison system. He or she doesn't see himself or herself a transformation agent, just a person that opens and locks a prison door. So that needs to be worked on. They had to see themselves as people that also work to transform. So I made this cut off here to show you, to talk about the national politics on integral attention of people that are in prison. It's a from 2014, so it was a collective construction between health and public safety ministries, and then it goes into the state and municipal level to be applied. The state administers because it's part of the prisons system, and the municipalities do the executions, the plannings. Then I ask you, or you ask me, where is the issue of drug addiction or chemical addiction treated within this policy? There is no such thing. And nowhere in this policy they talk about people that are drug addicts and that are in prison. They talk about mental health issues, but that's all. So if we have an administrator here that act within the prison system or public safety, health, this is a provocation to you. Wouldn't this the movement after 11 years of this policy, of adding to this policy this issue of dependency also in this policy? Well, I think it's important for us to notice that it's not lack of willing or a type of limitation. We have to understand that in this prisonal system, we still focus on punishing. So while we do not have penal policies that while we do not have penal policies that also treat dependency, chemical dependency, we won't change the scenario, and we need to have the lack of specific rules and laws, which have noticed during this research. There's also the problem of the lack of scientific studies in this area that treat this matter of chemical dependency in the prison system. So I didn't bring here today, but I have I'm showing you my contact here. So if you're interested in the research that I have developed, my papers, you can look at it because my time has passed, has come to an end. So, but I make myself available to you guys. If you want to talk to me, I can share my study with you. Thank you. Thank you. Your provocations, your results bring us some provocations, but also in line with some data regarding the open drug scene. Now, Alison, the floor is with you, talking about the actual experience within your Aliança de Misericórdia entity. Good afternoon. It's such a joy to be with you here today. As presented, I'm the missionary of the Aliança de Misericórdia, a Catholic institution. I'm from the state of Ceará, and I live in the state of São Paulo, in Piracicaba, the city of Piracicaba, which is our main humanized intake house. And because we don't have much time, I'll be brief. What is our work today as the Aliança de Misericórdia, and then we will get to social reinsertion. Two years ago, 1 year ago, two missionaries were on the streets and stayed 3 months here in Brasilia, living on the streets with our street brothers, as we call them, eating with them, living with them, and doing this experience of being one with them. Recently, a month ago, 15 days ago, I also underwent this experience. I stayed 15 days on the streets with these at the commercial south sector in Brasilia, and the 3 months they stayed and last year, and this 1 month we stayed, around 35 brothers and sisters left the streets. We forward them to other therapeutic community, to houses of families that are friends. So this is what we lived. So that's what I want to bring to you, how we experienced this. On the streets in Brasilia, I met this young man, Jonathan. He was in debt due to drugs, and he approached us. He approached us and said, "Help me, because I don't know what to do, because they want to get me. They want to catch me." And we didn't know what to do, just as he did at that specific time. And by talking to him, he said, "Well, it's been 3 years I've been living on the street. I have no contact with my family. I don't know where they are. They abandoned me. They don't want to contact me. They won't do not want to keep touch." So we continued talking. He asked for us to pray for him. We did. And in the end, he said, "Can you give me a hug?" And I said, "Of course, of course." And I hugged him, and he hugged me so tight that the only sentence he said was, "Oh, it's been such a long time that I didn't feel a hug, that I didn't know what a hug was." And that really impacted me, because what is a hug? If you think of our day to day, our realities, what is hugging? But at that specific situation of his, a hug made all the difference. And he said, You are not biased against us. You have no prejudice. And that in a certain way brought me to this day today to tell you about this experience because it reached my heart. I looked at that situation of Jonathan this week in the Congress. I want to see if I can find him because at a specific time he did not accept to be intaken, but this experience motivates us to help more people and go beyond. Our doctor here said, not focus on the substance, focus on the person, because the person has a value. The father spoke earlier today. They have potential. They are capable, very capable. Our duty, our work is to make them see their own potential because it's common many times, and I talk about the greater stigma, which is prejudice, which people cannot see. They don't understand they are dignified people, that they are also capable of growing, evolving, of having a better life. This make them seek and leave this condition. Of course, there's an entire situation, everything that happens before, but actually giving this strength so they can leave this place, that's very important. In the community today, we have 6 income humanized intake houses. One in Babacena, another in Alfena, that are in Minas Gerais, Babalha, Ceará, Rio da Pedra, São Paulo, Piracicaba, São Paulo, and São José dos Campos. And there's another house, a women's house that we have in Tremembé. All these humanized intake houses, they are simple houses that provide dignity and this living spirituality for each person we intake.
The activities of self-care promotion and spirituality, sociability are our main paths. We understand that spirituality, just like the doctor said, it's extremely important. Both spirituality and the activities make them, their search for dignity, have this interchange. We also do follow-up with them to try to reconnect them with their families, so that they can have that bond again, restore that bond, so that later, when they get to the end of their path in the therapeutic community, they have a place to go. Today, how does our work in terms of time? We have the triage, screening, the screening process where the person spends from 30 to 60 days there, and they have the abstinence issue. They're followed by copies. We try to do that together with public services so that we can monitor them well, so that they can arrive and make each step easier. And then they spend their 1 year in this, when we call the path. They continue their working with CAPS, being catered to with CAPS, but they go to the doctors often to take a look at their health. There's a nurse that monitors them, works with them for them to be good at the health level. Then you have volunteering. After that path, they become volunteers because we wish them to be able to have that training. They start studying, start taking courses, so that later in their reinsertion, they can get a job and, in a way, have their sustainability, can provide for themselves. Like reinsertion. I'm in Piracicaba, and for 5 years I have been there. And in that house, I monitor the reinsertion house. We have nearly from 10 to 15 men who are in this process of rebuilding their lives. For me, what's stronger during that time is to make them is to have them dreaming again and their search for dignity and for reconstruction. I was talking about prejudice, right? Understanding that because they talked to me about that a lot. They said I'm not being able to get a job. When they see my resume, I don't have training. I don't have anything that can, value, let's say, them in the labor market. So I established partnerships with private companies that later could help us as they could and help them to enter the labor market. And as they were more trained and recognized themselves as men, as people who needed that help, they took these steps. They dreamt again and found their dignity and their path for reconstruction. And this partnership we built was what helped us to help them grow within the labor market. Today, there is one of our intakens that he lives in Fortaleza, and he works as a soccer referee because after he left the therapeutic community, he went to college and he found himself in that purpose. And he has that job, which is considered a good job as a referee. And today he provides for his family. So he took a step further. So there's the possibility, there's potential. And for those who do not have that effort, I mean, God put in the heart of our founder the Rahamin City, which is a project that facilitates and helps those who need help in their social reinsertion. So it's 800 square meters. It's a property that's very huge. They are ecological houses, and our goal is to people leave therapeutic communities can live in their house to rebuild their lives. This is our wish. Thank God today we already have several houses that has already been built in city Rahamin, and we want to grow it even more to help because there we intend to promote trainings to improve their search for jobs in the labor market, and they later can choose to continue to live in city Rahamin or look for a place to live outside. And that's it. Thank you very much. God bless each one of you. Obrigada. Thank you very much, Alessandro, for presenting our experience together with Aliança de Misericórdia. Now I will ask you to go back to my first slide, please, because I will work together with Glilta.
Então agora
So now, from what place are we talking? I'm talking about a psychologist, a social psychologist, political psychologist, which are my fields of expertise. I talk as a former children's counselor because I used to work with children and adolescents who were homeless, and we saw that cycles were repeated in which their parents used to be homeless, their grandparents, etc. I also talk as an expert on social development because I'm a public servant and I had to work about public management. And I have made many, I'm sorry, I have made many mistakes, and these mistakes taught me to get things right. We cannot deny our mistakes and our paths. So thinking about that process, when I already had that contact with homeless people, it was the same population which I worked in as a public servant in the city of Uberlândia, and later Gleuda put me back to that path in 2013. I questioned some truths. I like to ask these questions. First question is it social reintegration or social integration? Because for me to reintegrate, the person has had to be integrated before. Are we talking about insertion or integration? It seems a bit silly, but it's not, because there's an entire sociological concept that's involved. But sometimes our drug policy, we carry some concepts that come from the prison system. These are concepts such as using, oh, the intake is going to, because it's a terminology that we use in the prison system with the, which is called HISO. And if you look at any other languages on drug policy, used in drug policies, anti-drug policies, they are imported from the prison system. Even when we had that fact that correspondences were violated, mail were violated, when rights are limited, they cannot have access to mobile phones, as the person were under a penalty, so I'm going to limit some rights. The question for us to think in reinsertion or insertion or integration, reintegration, I choose the word integration. First, we must ask, what's drug addiction? I'm not talking about an addiction that I will repeat that it's a psychosocial disease. What's beyond that? What's the role of the drugs in the life of those individuals? Because if I treat as a disease, I'll have a diagnosis, I will see in my exam, oh, it's a drug addict. If I treat as a disease, I will take a medication, it's solved, or at least controlled. But we know it's not like that. So if I don't try to understand what's the role of drugs in the individual's lives, I cannot build with them a process. If I do not understand and make that person understand why they became drug addicts, and if it doesn't understand its own history, they do not enter on the process. And if, as a technician or professional, in my evaluation, I don't understand the consequences of that in the individual's lives, because we need 3 times, right? It's my own theory that says that for good information we need intervention, we need 3 times. What happened when they started to use, what happened from use up to the present, which are the consequences, and how do I work towards the future. Today, homelessness, it's interwoven with drug addiction, and it's very strong. That which vulnerabilities are prevalent in the association of homelessness and drug addiction? And currently, why do you continue to use drugs? It's the same question that I ask to my colleague, because he cannot stay eating sweets all the time, and he goes there and he eats sweets knowing that he can't. He's aware of that. So if I can't work and understand, I will not be able to find a path. But for all of that, for each work, I must do an assessment. Today, we in São Paulo, we work with 8 dimensions, which are the self-care and organization dimensions. What have I lost throughout that gaze on myself, and how do I reorganize myself? Citizenship and justice, that even has to do with documents. Dimension, education and training for the workforce, family dynamics and support network. And here I want to talk about that. When I talk about social reintegration and or integration, there are 3 dimensions that are fundamental. Otherwise, we will not have good results. Relapse will take place. It is the family dynamics and support network. And here I'm talking about affectional relationships and sexuality, which we do not want to talk about. We do not want to discuss. Within income and labor, relationship with money, which we have problems to discuss. And we're talking about leisure and culture, which is often ignored. So a person, if it does not have, I always like to tell this story.
So I say I have a 45-year-old girl that was born. I have this 2 girl, the 45-year-old that was born in an open drug scene, and a boy that also was born on an open drug scene. He lived in the streets. He was jailed first in a teenage prison system, then an adult prison system. He's probably some type of mental deficiency because because his mother used drugs. And he came to me and said, ma'am, Liana, ma'am, it's so annoying to be an abstinent person. I love his truths. And I said, why? Explain it to me. Because the only thing I can do is pray. Is he wrong? What am I telling him? What are we offering him? And then I go back to Diogenes when he says, don't offer me what you cannot deliver, because I'm going to say that I'm going to take the drug away from this person, but I do not assess all of this and how I will build new things with this person. Who are my friends when I'm using drugs? That's what he said. Who are my friends when I'm not? My friends, they are drug users. My territory is the drug scene. What am I offering him that is different from all that? Or I'm only saying, I'll take that away from you. And I'm basically saying, jump in abysm. What family? What family does this guy have? But my heart beats. I want to love. I want to desire. I want to be desired. How can I discuss this? Affective relationships. How can I discuss with this person that pleasure is part of it? And this is something new that many people go back to relapsing because they can only have pleasure or an erection if they're using drugs. Because maybe their entire life they never had a sexual relationship without using drugs. And the technicians, the professionals, they're not prepared to discuss this with them. So when we started to analyze this more carefully, sex was mentioned. So we need to evolve. We don't want to discuss about leisure. Where do relapse happens? Relapse is not because family fights. All has to do with the victories, the wins, the parties, the euphoria. So when the Paulista finals of the soccer matches, we know if we're not there monitoring them very strictly, they will relapse. Now today our team goes to these people to the matches because it's possible to work leisure. If I don't work leisure, he won't resignify leisure. So it's not only praying and chanting religious all the time that will make them advance. It's how I can listen to that, re-signify. I like joking with them. I ask, I relapsed. And why? Oh, because I fought with my wife, my mom, and I went to the bar and started drinking. And I said, wouldn't it be better to listen to Marília Mendonça? And then we start discussing. Because how can you go to a barbecue where the samba is there, the caipirinha is there, and not using it because it can be my trigger? And I'm going to samba and I'm going to have fun. How can I participate of carnival, which is part of our culture? Now we are for our team we are entering the red alert, which it begins in November and only ends after carnival. And why? Because now next year will be different. Christmas, everybody loves themselves, and it's true. Sometimes they don't have a family to love. My world is not different. People are dreaming because I don't have that. All of that is a risk. How can I discuss social reintegration if I have these emotional issues to work on? Then we have our summer here, summer drinks, spirits, plus carnival, because now São Paulo, we have the pre-sessions, pre-carnivals that start at the end of the year. If we do not work that, guys, that is actually rethinking social reintegration. Social reintegration is not just work and housing. If I'm not able to look at all of this, there will be this void, this emptiness, and the relapse will happen. So that is why we developed, by listening to their demands, we developed the therapeutic houses, where the last step is this process of social reintegration. That is why we readapted our old methodology of therapeutic humanized intake to the hybrid model, where we start working on all these dimensions while they're still there. And that's why we developed the prevent space, which is for people that have already entered the therapeutic support, but they can go there to develop a new family network, a new action of leisure culture, so that he can or she can maintain their abstinence. Because it's not just working in a specific time period of 15 days, 3 months. Each person has their own methodology, but how to support this individual within his path. And public policies cannot fail in this sense. Now I will pass on the floor to Gleuda. She's going to discuss based on public policies, public administration, other paths that are possible. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I chose to make a final reflection with you guys. It was important to listen to the professors, Eliana and our friend from Aliança de Misericórdia. My regards to Bia, who's our friend. But we will mention all of this within a perspective from a place from where we work, where we live, where we in fact have public policies that in practice is the result, which is serving people. So when we think of implementing a public policy on drugs, our experience is São Paulo. First thing we have to think about is evaluate the administration. So Clarice mentioned something very important when we think about providing and designing policies against drugs. First, it's it's themed, it's universal, and it's transactory. And so it's difficult because it's not only about health, not only about prison, not only about the social. It's a policy that underlies all these dimensions. So when we're talking about such complexity of public policy, we have to understand what is in fact practicing such policy with data. So public administration cannot be, I think it's this, I think it's that. You cannot think it might be something. I need to have data, analysis, insights, data, hard data, to know that a certain action will lead to a result that goes from micro to micro dimension, transforming the lives of people. So when we think of the experience of an organization, a social organization that works on reinserting or inserting socially a person within the philosophy of this entity, we cannot say it's right or wrong. We have to say the practice of this organization will reach a specific profile and audience that needs that practice. Another profile, another audience will need another practice. So evidence that we put on the table and methods also and results needs to have this a broad range of options. So when the vice governor said in the morning that coordinates the articulation of this policy, he says we cannot be prejudiced and biased against the need of each user. We need to have a wide range of options for all types of profiles of users, and that's true. If we have to open spaces according to the demands they have. And information that is very important to make this link regarding public policies are those that leave the prison system. We notice that if we don't understand who is this audience that is in prison and what they mean putting them back in society, we'll always have this cycle of entering and leaving this prison system. We feed Cracolândia with the people that leave the systems, whether the health system, social system, prison system. And why do we feed Cracolândia with inflows? Why did we have inflows in such a dimension? Because we're not looking at the need of that specific public policy in that cutoff. When you start noticing that those that are leaving the prison, nearly 50% of them used to frequent the open drug scene, they came from this place. We need to, well, something's happening in there that is making them go back to prison, go back to the streets, leave prison, and they don't have no reference to where to go. So that's why they go back to the open drug scene. So when the therapeutic houses should be a complement of the connecting staff teams that connect hospitals that are going to a protected detoxification and protected environment, but it has to be connected to society. So the therapeutic houses, it's Brazilia's air is a bit drier. So the therapeutic houses, they are a connection of a methodology that was created by us within this model to say, look, the need of these people is not going to a therapeutic community or a hospital. It's a complement. But are people that actually need, which we call a therapeutic humanized intake, which is done by therapeutic communities, which is for the type of profile that we understand within the assessment that we carry out. A large part of them didn't need to go to hospital because they didn't have the abusive use, but the constant use and could not stop using, and so we're not able to resignify their lives alone. So this support was needed, and that's what we call it. We call it commitment to public policy within caring, treating, and also regarding behavior, how we will help this person to create new significations, to resignify their life through this network of services. So it was important for us to notice when we talk about policies against drugs, what does reinsertion mean? It means it's not only, oh, I gave this person a house, this person a job, he's reinserted. No, it's more than that. I have to signify with this person through the offering of services, resignify his life. It needs to make sense to him. Otherwise, they will not understand that this condition, their condition, which is our reference of values as a society. Oh, I live in a society because I have a house, a job, a car, so I'm okay. I'm reinserted in society. Those are our references, but for them, they need new references, not ours. That can be ours, but the need of this process of reinserting these people and providing new references to them in life and they'd like to have, and we motivate, encourage that. So working the policies against drug from this perspective of looking at the services within their conditions, the organizations that have their missions toward these different audiences, and that these organizations with these missions and methodologically and monitored services, because we monitor, we assess, we create indicators, we put metrics, benchmarks, we award the organizations that reach the results and the metrics. But all of this only makes sense if it actually transforms the life of these people. So in the afternoon, the vice governor said at the panel, how did we reach where we are? It was a method that we are able to create that the main open drug use of the city of São Paulo, downtown São Paulo, called Cracolândia, no longer exists. And we affirm that. It's not because the drugs doesn't exist anymore or the drug addict doesn't exist anymore. It's not that. Like Clarice said, many of them came from home. These people still exist because we as society continue producing people like this in society. These people today, on Sunday, there's several people leaving their homes because of their abusive use of drugs. We cannot deny that as society. But what we cannot deny also is that when you have a strategy of managing public policy where you put evidence as a relevant factor to execute this policy, which was the case of the open drug scene, the strategies that we adopted, several people working together, several fronts working together, made new people having new opportunities of resignifying their lives. When we say that these people came out from the place voluntarily, it's not because we caught their hands and they walked. No, it means that they started to resignify their lives in line with having new references, new values. As Clarice said, these people, they have a affective memory of their family relationship. So convincing them to leave that a condition, because that story of their lives is not that condition they are right now. So this worked very well for that audience, convincing them to reinsert in life.
Even mouth health, their teeth, and clinical issues that they were. But the affection memory. I had a place before. I used to have an identity. I used to have a family. I used to have a life. So people accepted that opportunity to seek that reference, that affective memory. So we had many techniques we adopted. At the same time, public safety had to see that we could not romanticize that place and say, oh, they're there because they like, because they want, because they love living there. No, they were living in the middle of rats and living abusively, even sexually. They were explored sexually and live in the middle of feces. So the level of violation of rights of those people who are there, you cannot romanticize. No, they are there because they were truly imprisoned in a condition they were in due to their drug addiction. So making that movement as public policies, it was important for us. We understand that so that law enforcement had to act. So people that were linked to traffic and organized crime were removed from there. They used to go there also to do money laundering, and so we called it the ecosystem of the organized crime. The bunkers that were the communities that were at the mercy of those situations, they couldn't even speak and tell what was going on there because many people were not related to crime, but they had to live somewhere. So we did all that in that region. So it was not only about removing users from one day to the other. We spent 2 years convincing those people that that was not the best space for them to stay and to identify and break the chain of organized crime. So drugs were not getting there easier. And we started to create a structure of social protection network to address that demand. 35,000 times people left that place to be taken care of. So public policies, they do work when they are based on data, when they are when they have in-depth study regarding each strategy. And the prison system is a challenge because there's many stigma involved, as Eliana said. We use many jargons from the prison system, so we need to end prejudice, and we must create an entire structure of a public policy that will not be solved through only one single path. Uh, you don't reinsert socially people under our perspective of value. Reinsert people under each one's value perspective, each story, each situation. So I believe that's what I wanted to tell you, to say that we truly believe in the path of social reinsertion, but from the perspective of the person who needs reinsertion and based on their story. Thank you very much. Thank you, Glilda. Now we will open for questions. Does anyone have question? Well, first of all, I'd like to praise the entire panel. Thank you very much. It was a very informative and inspiring moment. I think that for four ladies and a man, right? So it brings a different perspective. So, but Alison, you have a heart of gold. Congratulations. Well, I had to compliment you guys because it's from the bottom of my heart, but I have a question to Clarice. I was very much impacted with the information you brought that most people who were in Cracolândia were not originally homeless, did not live originally on the streets. And that differentiation has a logistical implication because you have to approach them in a different way. So I'd like a question. What's the exact proportion? Is it like 60% went to the streets and 40% were already there? What's the profile in terms of percentage? Thank you for your question, Professor Hermano. 80%, not less than 76. We had 6 editions, and all of these editions, were over 75% of people who came from their homes and were not in a situation of homelessness. And when we expand to Fortaleza and Brasilia, it's the same. The percentage is the same. It's between 75 and 85%. In other words, great part of the open drug scenes, and it seems that it's not a peculiar trait of São Paulo. It's that these people, they self-excluded themselves from society. So we are truly talking about reinsertion. Most of them come from a previous structure. And that's what this association is so interesting, because regarding the individuality that everybody talked about, the way you approach them depends on that. And that attachment to services and the experiences of going to different types of treatment, it's only effective and it works when we approach them at the first time, when you're talking about that profile, the profile of people who came from homes, basically. Thank you. Any more questions? Good afternoon. My name is Carlos Soares. I'm from São Paulo. And my question is to Dr. Alessandra, who talks about the prison system. At some point in my life, I left the prison system. I'm not ashamed to say that because my past does not define me. And truly, inside the system, the issue of drug addiction, the issue of psychoactive substances are very present. Today, even it's even easier because you have the synthetic drugs, right? And within what should be done through the system, which is punish and recover, we only see the punishment part. And my question, with all your knowledge, have you got to know the APAC method? Because I'm a result of APAC. Dr. Mario Tobon used to say that things only make sense when we get to know them. And the APAC method in Brazil today has a high rate of recovery because it resignifies the entire former inmates' lives or the inmates' lives. Thank you for your question. What's your name? Carlos. I know the APAC method. And in Campo Grande, the capital of Mato Grosso do Sul, there's a project. I don't know in what stage it is, but they have the place. We have a public prosecutor that's committed to the issue, and she's putting on a lot of effort for us to have an APACI there. And truly, the work developed by APACI is amazing. Up to what I know, nearly 3% of reincidence, a relapse. It's amazing. So it's totally disproportionate regarding to the relapse and the recidivism in the prison system. And please correct me if I'm wrong. But one important thing that must be considered is that the profile of the inmates who go to APACs is a very well studied and selected profile. For instance, if I have a person who is in the prison system and the person has 30, no, too much. It still has 8 years left to serve in the closed system for drug trafficking or theft followed by death, by assassination, or it has recidivism for several times. Is this the profile that APACI will have? Very difficult, I'd say, because APACI is a service that they are trying to develop with people who are close to ending so close to a semi-open regime or do not have a continual history of prison recidivism because a person with that profile is a person that does not deal well with regime progression. If there is an opportunity, they will not come back. So it's not a profile that APACI wants for its structure. So all of that study that's very well prepared of inserting people in APACI makes APACI have these rates. But I believe that it's an extremely efficient tool and that must be expanded. We have many inmates that deserve to undergo or to go through a more humane system, more that promotes truly reintegration, that provides the possibility of re-educating. Thank you for your question, Carlos. So you guys, now we will end our session. Thank you very much for being here. I invite you to know the stand of the stage in which you have these data available there, and recalling you that on the 18th in the morning, the Alvorada Auditorium, we will talk about the challenge of developing and implementing public policies aimed at drug addicts in situation of homelessness. So it's a mini course the state is offering. Let's take our picture.